Tampa Bay Bucs, the final draft to analyze here for the 2025 NFL draft. You're calling it a down the fairway draft. They got a whole lot of good football players. I like it for the second straight year. Emeka Egbuka in the first round, Ohio State wide receiver. Benjamin Morrison, the Notre Dame corner in the second. Jacob Parrish, Kansas State corner in the third. Then back-to-back edge rushers in rounds 4 and 5. David Walker from Central Arkansas. Big Elijah Roberts from SMU. And then Tez Johnson in the 7th from Oregon. So, I mean, you called that the high. I mean, those are all just good football players. They're just all good football players, including Tez. I mean, I would call that the good football player that ran 4.51, way undersized, and that's what they got. So they just continued to grab good football players. Your thoughts on this Bucs draft here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just drafted a series of extremely safe football players, guys who might not have like off the charts level of upside, but were just really good. Yeah, by the way, Jay McGarry there mentions in the chat, I didn't mention the fact that the Falcons draft value wise was by far and away the number one, according to Arif's work. So Falcons effectively had the most valuable draft relative to the capital that they expended in this entire thing.
Yeah. So you want to we'll start with Ibuka at the top here for the Bucs. I have a soft spot for not drafting needs and getting good football players. So obviously I like this. The fact that the Bucs have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan on the roster did not keep them from getting Ibuka. I also don't think it diminishes the value because it's receiver. If it was a tackle and you have two starting tackles, you could argue, hey, this guy's never going to see the field. But as a receiver 4, Chris Godwin coming off of injury, I think he sees the field. And, the more I watched Ibuka in this process, the more he grew on me. He was another character guy that everybody was raving about, but also I think he could play in the slot, tight splits, gets open. Ball skills were outstanding, especially at the catch point. Catches the ball really well. I think he moves well enough. So I think he's a really good player, and both in the short and long term, a really nice play here for the Bucs.
Yeah, Ibuka's an interesting draft pick because they didn't just not have a need at receiver. Like, they really don't have a need at receiver. They just brought back Chris Godwin and signed him to a lot of money to do that. They've got Mike Evans still there. They have, other options in that group. Jalen McMillan, who drafted, looks really handy and looks like there's a lot of redundancy in Ibuka to what they already have in Godwin and McMillan. And I think it's a case of, look, we're just going to take a really good football player. And Ibuka, I think, is one of the more interesting draft picks in the draft to me because pretty much everybody viewed him exactly the same. Like, he might have the narrowest range of evaluations of anybody out there. Everyone viewed him exactly the same, as he is a classic high-end number 2 receiver who exploits zones extremely well, who's good after the catch, who's powerful, who does everything really well, but doesn't really have number 1 upside. And the only difference really was, where do you value that? Do you think that's a second-round player? Do you think that's a high first-round player? Where do you put it? Evidently, the Bucs viewed it, not only is it worth a pick where they drafted him, 2/3 of the way through the first round, but it's worth doing that even if you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan already on the roster. So a sort of fascinating evaluation of where the Bucs valued that skill set.
Interestingly enough, I put him in my notes. I put him on the big slot spectrum of like a Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Boyd, or Chris Godwin, as far as that spectrum of players. So, I see the chat talking about Godwin might be cooked. If that's the case, then the Bucs extending him for $22 million a year might not have been the wisest thing in the world, but it is a nice security blanket if Godwin doesn't get back from the injury. Plus, he's getting a little bit older, obviously. So I like that as a pick. And again, everything else, Benjamin Morrison, we're calling this safe in football players, which is true. The risk with Morrison, though, is multiple hip injuries, surgeries, missing a lot of time last year. But again, when he's on the field, I think he's a first-round talent, Benjamin Morrison. And there's also a potential need at starting corner in a year, or as Jamel Dean gets a little bit older, figuring out his future. Are they going to re-sign Zion McCollum as a long-term play there? So I think Morrison, and then Parrish, a guy with inside-outside ability and some flexibility, tackles really well, just a really good football player to get in round 3. I guess you could call Morrison the riskiest of this group, though, just because of those hip injuries.
Yeah, I mean they gave Chris Godwin $44 million guaranteed. So if he is cooked, that was a bad decision. The Ibuka thing is interesting. I don't think I would have drafted him there in isolation. Like even if I had for a different team in that draft spot, I think I would have valued him a little bit lower than that. I do think, look, I had him ranked as like outside of my top 10 receivers, but 5 through 15 are all in a really tight bunch in this draft. So I would have drafted him a little bit lower than that. And particularly for Tampa Bay, who already have that much redundancy at that position, I would have gone a different direction. But I don't hate the idea that somebody else valued him at that level in the draft. And that's what makes it interesting. The Benjamin Morrison pick is the one, yeah, that I think it's the most risky for a safe player. Like, again, he might be the most technically sound cornerback in this draft, right? Just incredibly good technique, incredibly good fundamentals, but he has multiple season-ending hip surgeries. That's terrifying for a position like corner where you need your hips. Like it's the first thing you're going to hear about in a scouting report about a really good corner is fluid hips, incredible. Like, so that might not be the case anymore for Morrison. In the second round, that's pretty risky to me. But if you get him back, the player that he was before the hip injury, he's a first round talent, I think. Jacob Parrish, really good player. The question mark, I guess, on him is exactly where he plays at the next level. He's, I think, going to get labeled as a slot guy based off his size, but he actually hasn't played in the slot that much. Like he's been way more of an outside player at Kansas State. Feisty, runs really fast as well. So sort of feisty, undersized, but runs like a 4.35, like is a blazing fast guy. And then their day 3 picks, I think, are awesome. The David Walker. If I hadn't seen David Walker at the Senior Bowl, I would be so much higher on him. Because his PFF grading is like off the charts, stupid. It's like 95, like which is that's in the Nick Bosa world of like best pass rush performances we've ever seen. But it was at Central Arkansas, right? It was a much lower level of competition. I mean, Renner said it looks like high school tape, and I think it does for multiple reasons. Number one, because the disparity of how good he is versus the players he's beating up on. But number two, the players that he's beating up on sometimes look like high school players. So at the Senior Bowl, he was solid, but he didn't exactly set the world on fire. But in the 4th round, like amazing value, I think. Elijah Roberts in the 5th round, great value. And then Tez Johnson in the 7th, like that's one of the best value picks in the draft, I think. Like unprecedented size, literally the lightest player, I think, in NFL history. And he ran a 4.5, so it's not like he had the timed blazing speed that people expected. But dude, watch that guy at the Senior Bowl. Like he just cooks people with quickness. That's going to play.
Yeah, I really like a lot of this draft. Here's Tez at the Senior Bowl. If you're watching on YouTube, it's a year removed from drafting Bucky Irving, who had a pretty bad workout for his size and for a running back, Bucky Irving, and then looked pretty quick, pretty explosive on the football field last year for the Bucs. I would not be surprised if Tez does something similar, where the workout was disappointing, but all those movement skills play. So again, that's why I'm talking about they just got good football players. I think they ignored some bad workouts, even in Elijah Roberts at 295 pounds, played edge at SMU, power player. So I love that 1-2 punch of him and David Walker being added to that edge room that has 1 year of Hassan Reddick, Yaya Diaby, who looks like he's ready to take another big step forward this year. Chris Braswell, who they got last year, who we described in the same manner, right? Just a good, fundamentally sound football player that they get maybe high in the second, but they got him, in the second round. So a nice edge rotation there. And the Bucs did not have any massive needs, but they added some excellent depth and players to compete and just elevate this roster.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. And those reps that we showed from the Senior Bowl came against Azaria Thomas, the Florida State cornerback. I honestly think that Tez was responsible for dropping Thomas in this draft. Thomas ended up going in the 3rd round, 73 overall. We were talking about him as someone that could go at the bottom of the 1st round, would be a high 2nd round type of guy. Tez Johnson might have individually dropped Azaria Thomas like a full round in this draft by just wrecking the dude at the Senior Bowl all week. So Tez brings that kind of quickness and ability, also some return skills as well, if you're prepared to risk a 155-pound guy as a punt returner and a kick returner.
So yeah, my whole take on the Bucs during the draft here, as I tweeted out, was like, look, the Bucs are just, for the second straight year, taking a whole bunch of good football players. And I get it, Bucs fans. You're like, wait, our whole roster is homegrown. Jason Light's been doing this for years. I'm not saying exclusively to the last 2 years. I'm just saying, in particular, the last 2 years, the better way of describing it for me is not a whole lot of players where you're saying, if this guy figures it out, if he gets better at this, if his production starts to match his athleticism. There's just not a whole lot of those players. From last year, Grant Barton being a plug-and-play interior O-lineman and playing center, to Chris Braswell, Tyke Smith, Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving last year. Good football players. You plug in and they play. This year seems similar. Ibuka, Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish, and then I would even say David Walker and Elijah Roberts as part of that defensive line rotation. And then Tez Johnson. It's going to be, on this team, it's going to be maybe easier to keep him off the field with all the receiver talent, but I think anywhere else it would be very difficult to keep Tez Johnson off the field and at least try to get the ball in his hands, create some mismatches, create some explosives with him. So I really like this Bucs draft top to bottom and a lot of the talent that they added.
Yeah, I think everybody they drafted should contribute in some way, shape, or form. Like it's difficult to find major roles for guys like Ibuka and Tez Johnson because of the players they've already got in the roster, but I think all of them have a pathway to being a useful part of the roster.
All right, so the consensus has the Bucs tied for 11th overall with their division rival Panthers, as I mentioned a little while ago, ranging from A to Thor's C-.
And then Arif's work has them with one of the most valuable drafts as well, one of the best value, the third most valuable.
Also rare for me, this is a 6-player draft. The 6-player draft plays with my brain. Once you're under 7, I'm like, oh man, this is tough for it to be good. But because they got wide receivers, corners, edge rushers, that makes it feel better. I compare this to the Bengals, who come away with maybe not even reaches, but 2 linebackers, a running back, a guard. It doesn't feel as good. Whereas with the Bucs, I mean, also the current roster helps it when you don't have a whole bunch of starting opportunities on your roster. But when you come away with a receiver, 2 corners, 2 edges, or whatever you want to call Roberts, maybe he's more of an interior player, and a receiver, it just feels better. Plus, I like the players here. So for a 6-player haul, I think the Bucs did a really nice job here.
They also brought in Desmond Watson as an undrafted free agent, which means they have both the heaviest and the lightest players in NFL history currently on the team. They had a pretty interesting undrafted free agent haul. They brought in Shiloh Sanders, who the other Sanders brother, to fly under the radar because of Shedeur. Shiloh Sanders, Will Shepard, the other Colorado wide receiver, they brought in as well. And as we said, Desmond Watson, the 465-pound defensive tackle.
Can we get Perna in your big video where everybody put their favorite prospects? Perna, he suggested Tez Johnson and Desmond Watson, his 2 favorite players, the heaviest and lightest ever, and they're both Bucs. Like we need a little, and then we got to rehash that.
It's obviously it's a long way to even making the team, but theoretically, right now, the Bucs can line up 2 defensive tackles next to each other that clock in at 810 combined pounds.
Oh, it's amazing. It would be amazing if he was just the tush-push specialist. Like we're trying to beat the Eagles. Everybody's trying to beat the Eagles. We think this is our big year. Double
A gap with 810 pounds. I want to see how far they can push back the Eagles' interior offensive line.
The tush-push defense in full effect. Plus, Watson has 100% of his carries go for first downs. Just saying. You have him and Vita Vea as lead. Vita's done some lead blocking. Get both of those guys out there.
And then with Tez, you've got the third option as well. Like you for some reason recently, this thing went viral again, where that Mike Leach had to be talked out of putting a little person in the backfield and throwing him over the line of scrimmage for a first down. Tez Johnson's in that kind of world, right? You're telling me that, we couldn't chuck Tez Johnson for 5 yards for a first down?
You definitely could. I would run the jet sweep with Tez behind Desmond Watson and Vita Vea coming out of the full house backfield, leading the way.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.